And that, one of the complaints among the radical rights right now is that it's very hard to compete with us because we actually have things like footnotes, and it's real stuff, and that people tend to gravitate toward that, which is true and fair.
Yeah. All right, Heather, I think something I hear people ask about you a lot is that you just seem to have this ability to have a handle on staying plugged in, more plugged in than anyone I know, while keeping your sanity. How do you do it?
So that's a good question. I think that you just answered it, and that is that I am incredibly frazzled when I don't understand things. So I look into them and I understand them, and once you understand them, you have a better handle on them. So that's why I write, and that's why I do what I do. But going forward, we are already being bombarded, really deliberate, because you throw up your hands and you say, I can't handle this, I'm just not going to think about it. And one of the things I would encourage people to do is to recognize that that is a technique, and that you can't pay attention to every last moment of it. Maybe to pick your lane, or to recognize that you can really cut down how much you take in, and be more mindful about it. So the comparison I always use is, I was a waitress in Oklahoma in the 1980s, and there was a guy there who was a really, really good waiter, best waiter I've ever worked with. And the floor would be crazy. It would just be crazy. And all of us would be running table to table, and people would be yelling at us, and we wouldn't be able to get stuff out. And he was always cool, and he was always calm. And I finally said one day, Ralph, how do you do it? And he said, well, you people are busy letting the tables run you, and I run the tables. He said, so when it gets crazy, I stand right here, which is right behind the microwave. There was like a wall, and it was a microwave there, and we could kind of hide from the floor there. And he said, and I take a deep breath and I say, this is not going to control me. I'm going to control it. And then he says, I look out there and I say, that table needs a Coke. That table needs a check. That table, those people are arguing. I don't need to get there for a while. That table needs this. And then I do it in a circle and I get it all done. And I've thought a lot about that, because deciding that you're going to run the floor and the floor is not going to run you is a lot about taking control of situations that are designed to make you crazy. And that's something I would urge people to do going forward, saying, I'm not going to react to all these stories today. Today, I'm going to get done what I need to get done, and I'm going to see where things are tonight. I'm going to pick it up again the next day.
So wise. Later in the hour, we are going to bring up a slide actually that is like kind of some do's and don'ts for the months ahead, which I think what you just described could be the headline for it. Just really, let's control what we can control, and some ways to do that. But I'm looking forward, you haven't seen this yet. So when we pull it up, I'm going to want you to sort of react. Is there anything missing? We can, tweak, edit, and then we will circulate it to everyone following this call. So we can all feel like we've got some good tools to do exactly what Heather has described, because so much wisdom there. What Heather just keeps you grounded though throughout all of it? Is there do you have a touchstone for it? Your why in all this?
Well, obviously my family and my friends in terms of me personally, but what really keeps me grounded, and what I think that maybe people need to hear, is that understanding the sweep of history means that people in the past are as real to me in many ways as people who are here today. And what that means is that I recognize that we are, all of us today, part of a grand struggle for that very human goal of the ability to control our own destinies. And when I think about what it means for us to take up those tools and to take up that fight, it's a different sort of fight than it was for people like Abraham Lincoln or Fannie Lou Hamer or Sitting Bull or Dr. Hector Garcia, but it's the same fight. And to be fighting in their company against neo-Nazis, the KKK, the people who were the bad guys in our history, feels like it's really worth getting up every day to do it. I really do feel as if we are part of this long American struggle, which is one of the noblest struggles in humanity. And, when I go to Washington, I go see Lincoln and we have a chat. And I tell him I'm doing the best I can,
Yeah.
And I think that understanding that while we sometimes feel overwhelmed, they felt overwhelmed too. And when we feel like we're not going to make it, they thought they weren't going to make it too. And they did. They did make it. They did make the world a better place. And that, I think, helps me to recognize that even when I get up and I read the news and I'm like, really? Oh my God, how is this happening? I can't believe that nobody's calling him on that. Why is he doing this? Doesn't anybody understand? I think it helps to sit there and say, well, Lincoln felt the same way. Or my mother felt the same way when she was a whack in World War II. Or, Fannie Lou Hamer felt the same way when they beat her almost to death. Every time you think that you can't win, you got to keep going because someday you will. And that, seeing us as part of a larger human struggle and a larger American struggle, rather than living in this moment of confusion, they made it through. We will too.
Yeah. Through that hard work. It's not just, okay, well, this will pass, we'll get through this, throw up your hands, right? I mean, it's exactly the opposite that gets us through this. And it's exactly the opposite of doing that hard work that is only possible to do together. I would love to hear from people in the chat too. What's your why? What's keeping you grounded on the days that feel really hard? I love people already responding, saying this group. For me, absolutely, my kids, my family's a huge part of it, but this community, knowing that as I live and breathe, all of you are out there and each of us doing our part together, it adds up to something so enormously powerful. Okay, I want to get at something really important to this community, and that is that while obviously we had a devastating loss at the presidential level, almost everywhere folks in the red, wine, and blue community worked at the local level, targeting these races in terms of, school boards, state legislature, state Supreme Court, so many ballot initiatives. MAGA had a pretty bad night when it came to a lot of those races. I mean, school board races, I think we won something like 72% of them going up against extremists. How do we build on these local wins? And kind of I think for some people, it brings up some cognitive dissonance. Like, how could have it been so bad at the top of the ticket, and yet we had all these wins down here? What do you make of that? And how do we go from here?
So I make of it, first of all, that this is really democracy. If you really want to make a difference, work at your local level and at your state level, because that's where people start to understand how the government really affects them. But the reason we had a problem at the top of the ticket was because of that alternative media I'm talking about, and the nationalization, if you will, of some races by those extremists at the very top level. And one of the things that really jumps out to me, and there's two things actually. One is that if you look at, as I do, at the polls that are coming out, and there was a recent one, I think two or 3 days ago in the Wall Street Journal, which is not known as being friendly toward progressives, that particular poll. 75% of Americans do not want the Trump administration to have sweeping deportation rates. 75%. And the numbers of people who actually want the policies that people like Trump and his team have embraced are really very low. So you have to see there's a huge disconnect there between what people actually want and what the incoming administration has promised, at the same time that incoming administration has promised different things to different people, has a razor thin majority, in part because of gerrymandering, which I see we have Kate Barr here, which can be totally cool. And I look forward in this next 4 years, and I'm concerned about many things, of course. But as somebody who studies politics, this is going to be an incredibly narrow needle to thread. And I don't really see how they're going to do it. If you watch how utterly discombobulated they have been since they were elected, and if you look even at what's happening in Washington D.C. for the inaugural, it's a expletive show, right? This is not hard. We do this every 4 years. I mean, it is hard. It is hard. It is hard to plan. I'm not denigrating those people who plan these things, but it's not like they didn't know this inauguration was coming. and it's a mess. And I think of those things, and I think one of the things we really need to emphasize both at the local and the state level is competence, is actually getting stuff done, because we're entering a period where we have a government that is badly out of sync with where the people want to be. And aside from who's in office, that's a really dangerous thing. You don't want your government to be that far away from what the people actually want, because that disjunction causes tensions that need to be addressed. And it's hard to address them without a really big lurch in one direction or another. And that's never good for a society. So working at the local level and trying to reclaim those states that have been so gerrymandered, they too don't represent their people, and working at the local level so people understand why these races matter and how the government serves them or doesn't is going to be really important going forward.
All right. You called out our good friend, Kate Barr, and I want to bring her up, as well as Tori from the Red, Wine, and Blue North Carolina team. Can we pull? Oh, there you all are. Tori Oglesby and Kate Barr, both from North Carolina. Welcome, Heather and Kate. I know you all have been in touch, like I think through the interwebs, but maybe I'm just excited to be bringing you guys together on Zoom. Listen, the reason why we wanted Tori and Kate to join us, everybody, is that, look, there are going to be a lot of moments this year, in the coming months and years, the next 100 days, where it feels like we can't win. But we're going to keep going anyway. That is how we get through this and how we're going to make it okay, like Heather said. So the reason why we wanted to bring on Kate, she is a woman who ran for office in North Carolina, even though she knew that she couldn't win in her district because of gerrymandering. Her campaign literally was called Kate Can't Win, and I love that. So now Kate has an organization focused on helping people run for office because she knows that the work couldn't just end with her own campaign. And then Tori is here too, because Tori and Kate have been causing an enormous amount of good trouble in North Carolina in the recent days and weeks, since Republicans have tried to come in and stop the certification of the win of Allison Riggs, who won as a Democrat from the North Carolina State Supreme Court. And they're trying to disenfranchise, 60,000 North Carolina voters in order to, let politicians decide who's going to win this election instead of the voters who actually cast their ballots. Okay, so we want to have you all up here because you have not said, okay, this election happened, I'm checking out. You've said this election has happened and I'm committed to democracy and making sure that my neighbors can be heard. So Kate, zoom us in, tell us what is going on in North Carolina right now. Heather, feel free to jump in. You wrote about what's going on in the North Carolina State Supreme Court in a recent letter. So Kate, can you give us a view from the ground about what's going on?
Absolutely. And I might be like the one person who sees a totally hopeless situation. And I just believe that's actually an opportunity. So what we have in North Carolina right now is a Republican judge who's trying to steal an election. Justice Allison Riggs won our state Supreme Court race by 734 votes. She confirmed that with a recount and a second recount. And now Jefferson Griffin, her opponent, has filed court cases to throw out almost 60,000 ballots on the grounds that they didn't have social security number or driver's license numbers on their voter registration. P.S. We all had to show voter ID to vote in North Carolina this time around. And those numbers weren't required for a large chunk of time during voter registration in the past. So people would have had to go remediate their voter registration. It's ridiculous. But it all comes back in large part to gerrymandering. So our state is a purple state. I saw a lot of North Carolinians in that chat. We really should have a pretty 50-50 state legislature, but we don't, because our districts have been drawn to give Republicans the maximum amount of power. And the reason they're able to do that is because our state Supreme Court said it was okay. And so the Republicans are very concerned about maintaining control of our state Supreme Court through the next 3 election cycles. So I need all of y'all to get on board with supporting Allison Riggs. Real comfortable with the name Justice Anita Earls, who we have to elect in 2026. And we got to win by more than 734 votes. Because I don't know about you, I can't live through this again. It can't be like this again. Yeah. So we're doing two things. We have to elect Justice Earls and we have to protect the election of Justice Riggs.
Amazing. Okay. And Tori, tell me about how you and Kate worked together this week, what you all did at the North Carolina Supreme Court on Tuesday, and how Red, White, and Blue troublemakers and volunteers have been working with you on that.
Yeah, well, Kate had the idea of showing up to the North Carolina Supreme Court and naming all 60,000 plus names that were being challenged here. And as soon as we found out about what she was doing, we hopped on board. Coalition work is my favorite work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to work together. So we hopped on board. A whole bunch of our ladies got to be there in the cold. We called it Get Bold in the Cold because it was freezing.
Of that.
And a lot of them got to be there with Kate, Tanya, and Diane from our team. And then we had Lori, Kim, and myself at our desk calling the women in our network who were on that list. And they were so appreciative, y'all. Like they were blown away. And thankful that someone was letting them know, hey, you're on the list. So when Kate figured out like, ooh, I don't know if we're going to get through all 60,000 plus names, we need videos. We need videos that will play at the live stream when we're done doing our live event here. I don't know how, but she quickly got the list all divided. She sent me 10 different lists, 15 pages each, you guys. And I just made a call. I said, ladies, troublemakers, we need you guys. We need 10 volunteers who are willing to sit, record themselves, name 15 pages of names, and then send it to the Google Doc and upload it. And when I tell you it was super easy to get these ladies to volunteer, I had 10 volunteers within 2-ish hours. Mind you, all the volunteers are mothers, worker, like with jobs, okay? Some of them didn't get home till 6:30 and they were like, okay, Tori, I'm recording it now, I'm gonna upload it. They were so committed, and it inspired me, because if we don't learn how to work together, nothing's gonna get done. So it was just a joy. I had the most fun. It was a fun work day because we got to do something in action, and you got to see community in action in real time.
So incredible.
And it worked. I feel like I should jump in and say, y'all, it worked. It made a difference.
Yeah. And Tori, I loved hearing just throughout the week, your team messaging everyone else at Red, Wine, and Blue being like, I found another one, because we had lots of Red, Wine, and Blue members who were on this list of disenfranchised voters, and none of them knew that they were, right? So you all would call them up, whether they were a Democrat or Republican. They were certainly not happy that their vote for Allison Riggs was being discounted, and, wanted to get involved. Y'all help them share their story on social media, help them contact the state Supreme Court members to say, like, hey, my vote matters, like, let this count. So it's been incredible to hear those stories this week. I love my girl Lisa Vahey in the chat said, women plus a Google Doc equals we can do anything. And I just like that shit is true. Like, and y'all are showing it. And anyone out there that's feeling like, oh my gosh, what could I do? I don't have all the tools. Do you have a Google Doc? Do you have yourself and a few other people? Like, we can do this. Thank you all for inspiring us so much. Please keep us posted on everything happening in North Carolina. We've got your back. And thanks for coming on.
Katie, I do want to tell you guys though, because of the pressure from Tuesday, Jefferson Griffin amended his complaint and basically gave the state Supreme Court permission to not have to disenfranchise all those voters, just the overseas one. So the public pressure works.
Yeah.
So yes, and we will post the YouTube video on Tuesday with all of your beautiful faces on it.
So incredible. Heather, had you heard about this? What was going on the ground?
I've been watching it, and I have to say, I think this is so fabulous. I learned about Kate when I was in North Carolina last summer, and instantly whoever was driving me connected us as a friend of yours, I guess. And what she's really doing is not just defending Allison Riggs here, but working to make people understand the gerrymandering that has taken place and how it's disfranchising basically North Carolinians. And that, in this case in here, yes, Allison Riggs is really important, because if the Republicans can hold the state Supreme Court through 2030, then they will be able to continue to gerrymander the state the way it is. That actually got thrown out briefly, and the state turned back to a 50-50 state, came back, and now it's a heavily gerrymandered Republican state. But every time you guys are out there saying, hey, they took your vote, hey, they took your vote, people listen and say, wait a minute, that's not fair. And that we're going to have to do around this country, and make people recognize that we are losing our democracy at the local and state levels, as well as at the national level. And this kind of thing, boy, it brings it home in a way that somebody like me shouting, hey, gerrymandering is bad, just doesn't.
Y'all kick ass. Keep doing it. Just
It's great.
again and again and again and again. I love it. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tori. I just love being sisters in arms with you.
If anyone wants to run like a loser in North Carolina, find me. We're going to run a whole bunch of can't winners in 2026.
Until you win.
You know what?
I want to be. Too.
I want to be here when you win an election.
I know.
And then I can retire.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
We'll
Yes.
all go again to Tahiti and have our Mai Tais.
There you go. Count me in.
So beautiful. Okay, Heather, I want to talk to you to bring it sort of zoom back out to a little bit more of that bigger view. One way you have explained the moment we're in, and I think that this is, again, one of these things where it's like, wait a minute, how did they win this election when we know that we're the majority? You just cited the 75% of Americans who don't want to see the mass deportation. I can go policy after policy, reproductive rights, book bans. There is no question that we are the majority. And I think that I've heard you discuss this in a number of places. I want to ask you about is that one way you've explained the moment we're living in and the way that Trump has gotten power is to talk about, you know this, if there are 10 people, right? If there are 10 people in a room, 8 just want to get by, they're doing their lives, but there are 2 people who want to control everybody else. And the way that they get that power is to get the 6 people out of the 8 to turn against the 2 at the bottom. And you explain that the way that this is done is through narratives and storytelling. And what I want to know, Heather, is how do we tell a better story than this one that seems to work so well for Trump in turning people against each other?
Well, and the importance of that negative story is it doesn't matter who those 2 people at the bottom are. You can turn against anybody simply by saying that whatever certain characteristics of them are dangerous to the community. And so, you can do a lot with that. And that's not new to me. I mean, that goes back through this, anybody who studies authoritarianism. But we have a much better story. This is the story that it makes me very sad that we haven't told for so long, that the United States of America has always been about communities. It has always been about people who are protecting each other and who are working to make sure that everybody has a decent shot at being able to determine their own fate. And if you think about the times when we have been at our best, and I don't think people would argue about us being at our best, it's when we come together to accomplish an expansion of those rights of citizenship in the United States. So when we talk about somebody like Abraham Lincoln, or, I'm going to pick on the same people, Fannie Lou Hamer, or Dr. Hector Garcia, or the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Those are not people that we honor because they were excluding people. They're people that we honor because they were including people. And that story, that idea that American values, the ones enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, that everybody should have a right to be treated equally before the law, and they should have a right to a say in their government, are incredibly central to who we are, but who humans are. And the key to America, the key to the United States, is that in this country, everybody, especially those who have been excluded from those rights of citizenship, have worked to overcome those exclusions and have expanded our understanding of who we are, understanding of who gets to belong to that. And so that story of agency, the people who have worked to expand what America means are almost always people who have begun by being marginalized and who have come to work with communities to expand that vision. And that story's great. That's Superman in the 1950s being drawn on posters that say to high school students, hey kids, if you hear anybody saying that different races or religions don't belong here, you tell them that's un-American. It's people from World War II coming from all these different places to work together to put down fascism. It's the civil rights movement. It's the abolitionists in the 1850s. It's the progressives in the late 1890s. It's those people who are saying, to be an American means to work together as a community to make things better for everyone. That's always been our best story. That's who's got Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and all these people that everybody in America claims to honor. And that's the story that I think we need to get back.
So we are the American story.
That's right.
It's so important, right? I mean, there's such an attempt always to co-opt the flag, co-opt American values, and like, please let us all just remember that we are the American stories. I love what you said. We have always been about communities. That is the story of our country. Heather, one of the things that reminds me of this so much day in and day out in the work that we do is that we are community builders, right? That's who's with us here tonight. We have, I think, almost 19,000 people on right now. And something that we noticed, in the midst of the last few years is the importance of people being able to connect locally, not just, across the whole country. And both is really important. And so I think it was probably 14 months ago now, we launched a Red, Wine, and Blue program called Trouble Nation, because, we love to call our volunteers troublemakers. So Trouble Nation, right? If we're spreading that good trouble all over the place and doing that at the local level. And so we launched heading into 2024 with this big audacious goal that, hey, why don't we try by the 2024 election to have as many local groups as there are Moms for Liberty chapters. Yeah, they've been at it for 3 years, but we feel the energy. So they had, at the time, I think it was 286 groups, like maybe 300. Today, in just over a year, Trouble Nation has over 520 of these groups. And these are independent groups started by women on the ground in your own communities. These are not part of the Democratic Party or any other major national infrastructure. This is a bottom-up. These are the women with their Google Docs getting shit done, out there. And so just when I think of where the energy, where the real community is coming from, like these groups, this is the story of America, right? That we need to be just shouting from the rooftops. When you hear that story, Heather, I just, there's so many women who have been given so much of their heart and soul and hours of time to creating these groups. Like, what do you have to say about such a phenomenon of, over 520 Trouble Nation groups evolving in such a short time?
Well, what I would say is this is, and I'm not talking about somebody just who's living in it, but somebody who studies it. This is literally how you change a society. You start with small groups at the local level who build community and who certainly do talk about political change, but demonstrate the connectedness of our society. And, it's funny when we think about the moment we're in right now, this really began in the 1960s, when you had a few radical right people starting to make these communities very quietly and taking over things like school boards and things like state governments and so on. This was a long time coming. And when I see people today building in a much faster rate these tight communities, and when I'm participating in them, this is really cool. And now we have social media that permits us to organize across these large spaces. It looks, I'm convinced we're in the middle of a major change in American history, a major political change, a major movement. And I love that we're doing it sort of off the radar screen, because I think that's when you really build a lot of momentum. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I do too. Okay. So speaking of these, so many people in the chat are saying, I love Trouble Nation, or tell me more. How do I get more information? So we thought it would be really cool to bring up Carrie Knapp, who lives in Virginia and is a Trouble Nation group founder. And Carrie, just to, Heather, ask away if you have questions about, how all this works. But tonight we are really going to be giving people an invitation, like to action, to find your Carries, locally where you are, in order to be able to make this incredible change, like Kate and Tori described. like Carrie is going to tell us about too.
So how was it? How'd you decide to do it, and how did you start?
Well, I kind of jumped on the coattails of a Trouble Nation group that was just beginning. But I, as a former educator here in Virginia, I just saw what was happening with education, not so much the school board right near me, but not too far away, and what Governor Youngkin was doing, basically gutting public education. I said, I can't just sit here and not do something about this. And I knew
That's how it starts. That's how it always starts, Carrie. Literally every single person in this chat has had that exact, I can't just sit by. But then but like so often though, we're just like, okay, but I don't know what to do. So how did you get to that next place of action?
You got her right here on the screen with us. I decided I needed to do something, and was looking for something to do, and had been listening and reading your work, Dr. Richardson, for quite some time before that. And I heard you mention red wine and blue. So I Googled red wine and blue and found that this group was just starting, and that the first meeting was going to be like a month away. So I signed up, and I was a member of like 13, I think, or so, that were in our original group. And now we have about 260 people in our group.
Wow. That's great.
Yes. So great. That's amazing. And they're all like in your local area. That's so much power.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you how many people there were that were interested in this?
Not really, honestly. I think because of listening to you and reading you and your work, and I was just starting to hear that a lot, like I've got to do something, and talking about people getting together at the local level. I think it surprised me how fast it happened. Maybe not quite how much we've had, but we started in March. And here we are.
Carrie, I think, and the other thing people are asking, like, where are you in Virginia? So Carrie's in Northern Virginia, but y'all, there are, I believe the latest number I heard, that 52 Trouble Nation groups in the state of Virginia alone. Okay, and that is so important because the state of Virginia has their governor's election in 2025. Only two states in the nation elect a governor this year. Virginia is one of them. Y'all are going to be having major state legislative elections. Your whole state house gets elected this year. There are school board races. So it's going to be all eyes on Virginia this year, because in these electoral years following a presidential year, that's really an opportunity for the whole country to look at, okay, well, how are people responding to what just happened in the presidential election? So not only do you all have this huge opportunity to come together, collectively express your values, but also to send a message to the whole world, and so, yeah. And public education is so at the core of this. Thank you for being an educator.
And we're starting sending our message. We kept the legislative majority in Virginia with our 2 special elections that we just had. So the Democrats are now still in control of the General Assembly in Virginia.
That was so huge. Everyone in the chat is asking, is there a Trouble Nation group here? And people are asking, so Trouble Nation is a program of red wine and blue, and that's like a great way to get involved with us. And in our after parties coming up at the end of the hour, we're going to be giving people a chance to connect with each other locally so that you can find out if there is a group where you already live, or if you might want to start one. And we have a whole team that works day in and day out to support our Trouble Nation leaders. And so, just like Carrie works with them, you all can do that too. But yes, New Jersey, you have a governor's race this year too. And we have Trouble Nation groups in New Jersey. So I believe that they exist in every state. And Patricia Jordan wants to start a group. Girlfriend, you are in the right place tonight. So I'm super excited. Tennessee, the answer is yes. No matter what state you ask me, I'm going to say yes. They're out there. Your people are out there and waiting.
So Carrie, I'm totally impressed. And I also want to say that one of the things that's really cool about this is that we are remaking democracy from the ground up. And I don't think it is unimportant that it's women doing it. This is our moment to construct the kind of society we want to see. And I, speaking of reaching back to the past, much of what is being dismantled right now, or looks as if it is going to be dismantled going forward, is stuff that was put in place by Francis Perkins with the Social Security Act of 1935, and the idea of government protecting community as opposed to protecting just the men and their employers who were driving a paycheck economy. And I love the idea that we at the local level are saying, hey, these things matter to our children. They matter to our elderly. They matter to us. They matter to having a functioning society. And we can do it in a better way than we've done it before. I just think that's, it's like being at the start of a whole new era.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you, Carrie, for being a leader at that, a leader in telling the story of America and building democracy from the ground up.
Thank you.
You're amazing. Okay, Heather, I want to get in a few more questions before we get to the end of our time together. I want to talk about burnout for a second. You have talked about kind of how you stay plugged in without, going insane, all that. One thing I would love to hear you
That
weigh in.
presupposed a lot there, Katie.
You never burn out, right? But one thing we're hearing, especially from Black women in our community, is they're opting out. Many of them are choosing to opt out of things like marches and rallies after years of truly carrying a disproportionate amount of the burden when it comes to organizing. And they're doing this to just give themselves a beat, to take care of themselves as they think about how to thoughtfully engage in the years ahead. Heather, when you hear that, what do you think? And what do you maybe want to say to white women out there and how it's critical that we step up?
So first of all, the first thing to say is thank you to the Black women who have carried us for so long. And the second thing to say is that while it's absolutely fine to take a step back and breathe and let somebody else carry the ball forward for a while, it would be very stupid of us not to pay attention to all the ground that they have already broken and everything they've already taught us about putting together movements. And there's a ton of work that you can walk through on how the Black female community has done so much for civil rights in this country. But for white women, I would say, yeah, it's our time. And it's our time to learn those lessons and to carry them forward and to recognize that one of the things that those stories you were talking about that people in power can use to turn others against those people at the bottom have been used against white women in such a way that they have been voting and acting against their own interests, not only against their political interests and their economic interests, but now actually against our health. And we need to be aware of those things. We need to push back against them, and we need to construct our own news stories. And when our Black neighbors are willing and able to come back to say, thank you for everything you've done, and we're excited to be working with you now and not trying to get you to carry everything.
Beautifully put. And I thought that was important to name. And, also one thing we didn't have quite time to get to with Carrie, but I just want to acknowledge so many Troubled Nation groups are doing days of service tomorrow. Like instead of tuning into the inauguration, like honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with these days of service. If you're feeling a little bit like, what do I do with myself tomorrow? And you do have some time open, maybe your work is closed, like get plugged in. Get involved in that. I took my 9-year-old to an MLK, celebration service at our local middle school this week, and it was a highlight of my week. And it was challenging stuff, but like let's root in to the things that matter and do it with people that we love.
Can I add to that one of the really important things to remember going forward as we fear the rise of authoritarianism in the United States is that authoritarians cannot rise if there are strong communities and people are acting with joy. That is, you need despair and anger in order for an authoritarian to rise. Think of the language that we hear from MAGA Republicans and how angry they are all the time. In terms of burnout, it's okay to say, I'm not going to pay attention to politics for a while, but it's not okay to stop bringing your best to the world, whether that's, gardening or, your job whatever you do, or caring for your parents, or whatever those things are that you bring to the community, do them and do them with joy. And don't stop doing the things you love because you're scared, because that actually is a form of resistance. Showing up and doing things you love and doing it with joy says to an authoritarian, you have no place to root here. And that's going to be really important going forward.
Thank you for saying that about joy. It's so critical to how we do our work here. Laughter is permitted. Laughter is encouraged. Joy is why we fight, so that everyone can have access to joy. And it's our source of fuel. And I know I'm getting a great amount of joy just by being here and seeing everyone's reaction to wanting to feel that joy here in the chat tonight. Hold on to that. Okay. And it doesn't mean in these serious times, yes, these are serious times, but it doesn't mean we have to take ourselves too seriously. We have got to get through this and support each other, and laughter is going to help us an awful lot. Okay, you are speaking a lot to kind of these, how we're going to get through. I do want to ask, I think it's Drew, to put up this kind of little guide we have, a slide on do's and don'ts for 2025, some of this getting through. So on the do side, we have, some of this is about sort of, being a good purveyor of information and how just, to get through it. I want to get your take on this, what might be missing, Heather. So on do, we have, look, don't forget to breathe, vet info before sharing it, listen to your gut. If you are seeing something, you're like, I don't know if this is right, maybe don't hit that share button, y'all. Go local. Focus on what you can control, right? And that is reaching out to the people around you. Select 1 or 2 issues or projects that are important to you, where you have skill, knowledge, passion. Get creative. I'm big on this idea that the antidote to anxiety is creativity. When we are creating and connecting with each other, it is very hard to feel anxious. And most important, I'm going to bring it back to Trouble Nation again. Find your people. And this is part of going local. Join a group, start your own. And here's some things that I think we're going to agree on probably avoiding. Doom scrolling social media. Okay, y'all, it's just so easy to do. But just, delete those apps every now and then. Give yourself a break. That doesn't mean burying your head in the sand, but you're not helping anyone by spending that extra hour just doom scrolling. Don't share unvetted information, repeat disinformation, even if it's just like, there are going to be so many OMG and WTF moments every single day. And you could just forward the crazy thing that got said or the nutty thing and the wild thing that got done. But we are repeating and amplifying that disinformation when we do that. So don't engage with the trolls when you are looking for information. Don't use AI when searching for the truth. Go to the real sources like Heather. And that's how Heather writes her letters, is from the actual sources. In general, just don't chase the chaos and don't try to do it all, and don't go it alone. That's how we get ourselves buried in all of this. So anyway, Heather, what do you think? What would you add? People are often asking us for things like this, do's and don'ts.
Okay, so I think these are great. I would add under the do's,
Yes.
when you say take a deep breath, often it's not worth reading the first take in the media. There's always some, all the stories come out in the morning, and especially going into this next administration, when you say take a deep breath, I will wait to let things play out for a couple days, because they become much clearer over time. So if you feel free to look at the news in the morning, but don't go, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Because it's going to settle out over the course of the day and over the course of a couple of weeks. So for example, we know about this idea that the Trump administration was going to launch deportation raids into Chicago on the second day. Well, that got leaked, and there was such pushback against that. Now they're starting to back off on that. Those things are important, but think of the anguish that people went through trying to figure out what was going to happen next. So wait on the news. And the other thing I would add, which I'm trying to practice now, is learn something. Learn something new. Because read a new kind of book to you. Somebody put me on to George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, and I was like, okay, whatever. Love it. Learn a new language, cook something new, feed your brain in ways that are not going to inspire a fight or flight response, because that actually, you feel better about yourself when you learn something new. And I would urge you to try and learn one new thing a day. Try one new thing a day so that you're feeding yourself and not, again, letting the world control you. You're controlling the world.
Feed yourself, not the algorithm. How about that? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Heather, we only have a few minutes left, but I think people just want to know what's next for you. I don't think that you anticipated when you started writing your letters that you were going to be doing this 5 years later. Still.
No, I was going to quit the first 100 days of the Biden administration.
I remember you told me that the first time we ever spoke on the phone.
Yeah. So I will keep doing the letters, of course, as long as I am able. But you know, I'm going to keep on doing this. We have big plans for the 250th. So we'll see if that actually comes through. But in terms of feeding my own head, I thought you all would appreciate that what I did today is I gave myself a day off, and I finished the first draft of the first chapter of my new book.
Yes.
And it's a fun new book. I have a serious new book too I'm working on. This one's fun. I can't tell you about it until actually it goes to editors. But I'm doing it with a cartoonist. I'll just say that.
I love that. Well, I think that we're happy to hear that we have not just one, but 2 Heather Cox Richardson books to expect. Your, of course, Democracy Awakening. It's in my pile that's holding up my laptop, but that's great because it's always there for easy reference. And anyway, but I look forward to 2 more coming soon. And thank God you're going to keep doing the letters, because I know that it's just become, it's like the number of people who I know who it's like, wake up, Heather Cox Richardson coffee, before they even speak to their husbands. You know, that's like a thing.
Why would anybody walk away from this community? Why would anybody walk away from this moment where, you know, we are part of something that is so much bigger than ourselves? I know it's terrifying, but what an incredible gift that we get to be part of this. And, you know, yeah, I would love more sleep and I would love more time with my husband. And I actually would love to write more books. I love writing books, but why on earth would anybody take this extraordinary gift and not continue to participate in it? And I hope everybody else feels the same way, because it's this community that makes it worthwhile. And the recognition that we're changing the world is, what more could humans want?
I feel the exact same way. I've had people ask me since the election, are you going to keep going? Is it are you okay? Is this, I'm like, were you kidding? Doing this is my coping mechanism. You know, this is please don't let me stop. So yes, we are in this, and I know you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. You all on this call are not giving up, and Heather and I are not either. So we're stuck with each other, and I am so grateful and feel blessed for that.
You know, isn't it great? Look at everything that we have built and will continue to build. And you know what? After we're gone, there'll be other people carrying it forward. And that puts us right in history too. I just think it's the coolest thing. And I'm so very pleased and proud to be part of all of it with all these people.
Yeah, me too. All right, y'all. This is a really important part now too. You have heard Heather say over and over again that we can't just talk, we got to act. Okay. And that's why she's always pointing to go to Red, White, and Blue, because that's what we're all about. We're helping you do that and connect with others meaningfully at the local level. So now is that time. It's time to connect. It's starting right now. So our motto this year is that when they go low, we go local. So we are going to join that. We're going to do that right now. We are going to be joining Zoom breakouts. Our organizing staff is already in after party Zoom rooms waiting for you to join. Each Zoom is staffed with Red, White, and Blue team members, and they're going to guide you on how to find others in your very own local community. So we have after party Zooms. Some of them are for some individual states where we do have organizing teams on the ground, like North Carolina. You heard from some of those folks. We also have teams in Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina. I mentioned North Carolina, Ohio, and also Virginia because of all the action happening there this year. So if you don't live in one of those states, no problem. Join the after party that we have going for all the other states. And don't worry, we made sure Zoom made sure we'd have lots of space in that one. So we're going to, I want the slide is up. If you go to redwine.blue/after party. And right now, Drew, I'm going to ask you to pause the chat so that people can actually get the link. Pause the chat and please post this link. There it is. Julie Womack. Thank you, girl. The Julies always have my back. Click on redwine.blue/afterparty. You're going to go over there. If you live in one of these states, Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Virginia, you click on that state. If you live in any one of the other 45 states, you click on the US map. And you're going to go into a big, really fun Zoom room. The last time we did this, I think over 100, maybe 200 new local groups were started that night. Heather, I will be texting you tomorrow to let you know how many new groups started and how many more people joined these groups. And I even saw in the chat people saying, I just joined, I found one in my area. I'm going to the meeting tomorrow. I'm going to a day of action for MLK Day. Already 6 new groups formed before we even started the after party, Drew says in the chat. That was just to me, but I'm reporting out. Thank you, Drew. Already 6 new groups formed. That's incredible. So y'all just go to redwine.blue/afterparty, click on the whole map of the United States, or if you're in one of these states, click on those maps. There are organizers already waiting to continue this party with you there. You're going to get a pop-up asking if you want to leave this Zoom to join the new Zoom. Click yes. There's no more reason to be here tonight. We have given you all that we have to give, and we really want you to go to these after parties so that you can connect. So redwine.blue/afterparty, click, get the pop-up, say yes. Let's see, do we have a lot of people leaving and going there? Yes, it looks like almost 10,000 people have joined. We still have okay, it's going down, more and more are going. Okay, we still have about 6,000 people who are hanging out. We love y'all. We love you so much. But we want you to go to your after party to connect locally. So we're going to put on some music. This is your outro. Heather, thank you.
Always a pleasure, Katie.
Such a pleasure. And I can't wait to see what magic happens tonight.
That's right. Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Good night, everyone.